Alright guys, what's up? This is SonicSol here with another video. This time I wanted to go over the drive gauge, specifically drive regeneration and drive cooldown in Street Fighter 6. I know this might be a little bit of a nuanced video, but I'm going to try to break it down and be as layman as possible. I came across this tweet talking about the Street Fighter 6 drive gauge, the cooldown system, the natural recovery of the drive gauge, talking about varying actions using the drive meter that causes the gauge to refill faster, slower, the cooldown before it regenerates. In very layman's terms, what I'm getting at is, depending on certain actions you do with the drive gauge, how you are playing will determine how fast the drive gauge replenishes itself and the amount of cooldown before the drive gauge begins to replenish itself. They go over doing regular parry, you know, it doesn't parry anything, doesn't really catch anything, right? You just do it. It's roughly 4.5 seconds, 4.6, 4.5 seconds before the drive gauge begins to replenish itself again and auto regen. See? Next is when you do a drive parry and you successfully parry something. It only takes 1.5 seconds for the drive gauge to exit cooldown and begin regenerating itself again, as you can see. Now, if you do the parry into a drive rush raw, it takes 4.5 seconds after activation for the cooldown to disappear and for the bar to regenerate again. Now, one thing I want to note here is that the Ryu player is showing that they're jumping back, right? When they're jumping back, the drive gauge is replenishing much slower, right, than normal. I'm pointing this out now because in the next couple of clips, you're going to see he walks forward and it regenerates much faster. Any defensive action that you take when the drive gauge is filling back up, when you are walking back, jumping back, backdashing, neutral jumping, those are considered defensive options that you're using. The drive gauge and its rate of regeneration will decrease. It'll be slower for that drive gauge to recover. So you can see it's slow, but then he starts walking forward and it immediately starts gaining like normal, right? Like, look at him. He jumps back, it's slow, but then he walks forward for like a few frames and it starts going up faster. See that? Anytime you walk forward, you're jumping forward, you're dashing forward, anytime you're being aggressive, the drive gauge will speed up in its regeneration. And anytime you're being defensive and you backdash, you jump back, neutral jump, that's when it will end up regenerating slowly. So here they do drive rush parry into a button and you see it takes about like 4.3 seconds for it to fully regenerate or fully get back to normal regeneration. Here they do a drive rush out of a normal. They do a cancel into drive rush. This is only a 2.5 second cooldown. Here they do drive impact. Drive impact has a 3.5 cooldown rate before it starts regenerating like normal again. So if you do drive reversal, which is forward, heavy punch, and heavy kick, that's your guard cancel, and it takes 3 seconds, 3 real life seconds, for it to go back out of cooldown. If you do an EX fireball, right? If you do an EX fireball, it's 2.7, roughly 3 seconds, 2.7. But if you do a Tatsu, right, it's 3 seconds. So it's much slower. If you do a donkey kick, so you do OD high blade kick, it's 3.3 seconds. So it's more cooldown. If you block, it's only 1.5 seconds for the cooldown before the drive gauge starts regenerating again. See? And then throw, like whiffing, getting punished, right? If you get punished, so like if you get whiff punished or anything, the drive gauge stops regenerating for like 1.5 seconds. And then if you get hit by a CA, you lose drive gauge, and just like getting punished countered, it will take 1.5 seconds before the drive gauge starts regenerating itself again. I know this may seem complicated, but what I'm explaining to you is the way the drive gauge works when regenning itself and its cooldown rate. This is very, very important for when you're trying to figure out things such as being able to do combos that require you to spend resource, using your drive system to basically be offensive or defensive. It's going to create a lot of different situations where you're going to have to think about what you used and how much time you're going to have before it starts regenerating the drive gauge again so you can get access to your moves. It's very important, especially because with that cooldown time, your opponent can play with your drive gauge meter, and so can you. So as a result, you have to manage that paused time where you don't have the ability to recover the drive gauge. And remember, this is your blocking gauge too. Like when you're blocking attacks, this is what's gonna save you from losing advantage in burnout. So it's really, really important. And a lot of these principles with the drive gauge also applies to when you're burned out. These nuances matter for the drive gauge. I also want to show off something that you guys may have noticed that's very obvious if you've played and you've been practicing, or you've played the crack or the beta or the demo. Whichever way you played, let's say you do a combo into level 3. Now look at my meter. This is off of drive. You see how it immediately started refilling? You see that? It immediately started refilling after I did drive impact. When I did drive impact and I did the combo into level 3, it immediately started refilling. So I used 2 drive rushes. It took so long for it to start regenning. So the more resources you use, the more it's going to elongate when the drive gauge starts recovering again. And then when the animation for your level 3 ends, it will pause the regeneration. See how I didn't build anything for the raw Shinsho? I didn't build anything. If I go into animation, it takes so long for it to come back. And when it does during the animation, but then it stops after the hit is done and when the opponent gets knocked down. It stops before regenerating when they get back up. Let's say I've knocked my opponent down. You see how like it will regen as they got wall splat? So look, it doesn't start regenning until after they get knocked down and they get back up. You have to understand, when you do supers during the animation, you might build the meter back. If it's not a cinematic animation, if it's just a regular animation, it'll pause the regen rate. And it'll determine how long that cooldown is based on if you use any drive related systems. So that's very important when it comes to combo structure, when you're trying to be optimal, depending on certain situations, what you're trying to do, right? Like, it's going to add a lot of nuances to how you use meter, how you use this resource, because you only have 6 blocks of it. That's going to be super important. I know this is a very nuanced video. I hope you guys took something out of it and you learned something. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that way you get to know more videos like this and see more stuff on Street Fighter 6. Let me know your comments down below. Do you think that the drive gauge, do you think that they did a good job with making it nuanced, with making it have this depth? Or do you think that is a little too complicated to understand for meter resource management? Just let me know. And yeah, like the video, sub up, notification up. You already know what's good. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.